I've always thought my life was as predictable as the tide rolling in every morning here in our little coastal town. But lately it feels like every crashing wave is practically whispering, "Hey, change is coming." And honestly, I'm starting to believe it. I live in this town where nothing much ever changes, at least on the surface. Mornings start off with that same ritual. I grab a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, because why complicate things, and head out for my daily walk along the beach. It's become my little escape from everything: the sand under my feet, the salty breeze, and the endless horizon. They all help me clear my head and remind me that there's a whole world out there beyond the manicured lawns and fancy parties of my family's life. Now, I have to be honest with you. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the path that had been set for me. Growing up as a Laura, Victor Blackwood's daughter, wasn't exactly a walk in the park. My dad, well, he's a big deal around here. Outwardly, he's this polished, successful businessman who's built a reputation that everyone talks about with a mix of admiration and fear. But if you've ever listened closely enough to the hushed whispers behind closed doors, you'd know that his success isn't all rainbows and sunshine. There's corruption, shady deals, and a whole lot of moral shortcuts hiding behind that charming smile of his. I remember as a kid, I'd hear things, snippets of conversations that made my stomach twist a little. People would mention names and dates, and I'd piece together bits of a puzzle that made our Grand Blackwood legacy look more like a twisted fairy tale than a true story of success. And then there was me, always expected to just go along with it, to be the obedient daughter in a perfectly polished picture. But let's be real, I never signed up for that kind of life. Every day when I walk along the beach, I can't help but wonder if I'm really meant to just follow in his footsteps. I mean, sure, our life is comfortable, we've got a beautiful home, fancy parties, and the kind of security money can buy. But comfort can be a sneaky little trap, right? I often catch myself dreaming of something more, something real and raw. Sometimes I imagine just leaving it all behind, ditching the scripted life my dad's planned for me, and finding my own way. It might sound silly, but there's something almost magical about those early morning walks. As I stroll along the shoreline, barefoot with sand between my toes, I feel this connection to something bigger. It's like the ocean is my best friend, always ready to listen. I often chat away to the waves, telling them about my secret hopes and fears. I even laugh at how absurd it sounds. But hey, sometimes you need someone or something to confide in. The beach isn't just a pretty view, it's where I let my guard down. There's this cozy cove I've claimed as my own, hidden behind some rugged rocks where the sea seems to sing just for me. Sitting there, I sometimes think back to simpler days, when my biggest worry was whether I'd catch a glimpse of a playful dolphin or find a cool shell. Back then, the world felt wide open and full of possibility. Now, even though my surroundings are still beautiful, I feel a tug deep inside telling me there's more out there for me than just the life my dad's mapped out. Speaking of my dad, it's impossible to ignore how his shadow looms over everything. Victor Blackwood is the kind of guy who never really lets go of control. I swear sometimes it feels like every decision I make is pre-approved by him. He's got this way of making everything seem so calculated. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a part of me that's proud of his success, but there's also a nagging voice in the back of my head that wonders if all that success is built on sacrificing someone's happiness. And that someone, more often than not, seems to be me. I can't shake the feeling that my dad sees me less as his daughter and more as a trophy, a neat little accessory to his grand empire. I remember once during a fancy dinner, he casually mentioned some important business connections that were counting on me to behave in a very specific way. It was like I was just another asset in his game of power. And that, my friend, is a heavy pill to swallow when you're trying to figure out who you really are. There's a constant battle inside me. On one hand, I'm grateful for the life I've been given. A life of luxury, no doubt. But on the other hand, I'm tired of feeling like I'm trapped in a golden cage. I crave freedom, even if it means stepping into the unknown. I want to make choices based on what feels right to me, not just what's expected by everyone around me. And sometimes, as I watch the sunrise from my favorite spot on the beach, I swear the ocean is giving me a little nudge. Like, hey, maybe it's time to break free. You know what's funny? The more I think about it, the more I realize that change has a way of creeping up on you. It starts with these little hints: a strange conversation overheard at a local cafe, An odd coincidence that makes you do a double take, or that unmistakable feeling in your gut that something big is about to happen. Lately, I've been picking up on these signs, and they all seem to point to one thing. My life is on the verge of a major shakeup. I couldn't help but notice him the very first time. I mean, whoever pays that much attention to a uniform? Yet there he was, strolling along the shoreline like a sudden sea breeze, stirring up emotions I wasn't even ready to name. I'm talking about Lucas Grant, the new officer in town, and trust me, his arrival was anything but ordinary. It was one of those typical mornings when I was out on my usual beach walk, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of the crashing waves and the endless chatter of the seagulls overhead. I'd barely taken a few steps when I saw him. Lean, with a stance that spoke of a quiet confidence, his uniform crisp and eyes scanning the horizon with an intensity that made me wonder what he was really looking for. I paused mid-step and couldn't help but think, well, that's new. At first, I wasn't even sure what to make of him. I mean, our town isn't exactly the kind of place where something or someone new makes a big splash, but Lucas was different. There was something about the way he moved, the way he seemed almost in tune with the sea, that caught my attention. I stood there for a moment, pretending to examine a piece of driftwood, while my mind buzzed with curiosity. Who was he? What brought him to our sleepy coastal town? And for reasons I can't quite put my finger on, why did his presence make my heart beat just a little bit faster? Later that day, I found myself chatting with Mrs. Lovell at the local cafe, a cozy spot that always smelled like freshly baked pastries and the promise of a new day. Between sips of my too-strong coffee, I casually mentioned the new officer. I saw him this morning on the beach, I said, stirring my cup absent-mindedly. There's something about him. I can't really explain it, but he just stood out, you know? Mrs. Lovell, ever the town gossip with a heart of gold, leaned in. Oh dear, you mean Lucas Grant? I heard he's fresh out of the city, here on some kind of transfer. They say he's got a sharp eye for trouble, but something tells me he's got a soft spot hidden somewhere behind that stern look. Her words only deepened my intrigue. I couldn't help but replay that morning in my head, the way Lucas's eyes seemed to reflect the deep blue of the ocean, the way his uniform, immaculate as it was, hinted at a disciplined life that was so different from the chaotic, carefully manipulated world I'd grown up in. I remembered thinking, here's someone who might just see things as they really are, without all the smoke and mirrors. It wasn't long before I caught another glimpse of him. I was walking back home, lost in thoughts about the strange pull I felt whenever I saw him, when I noticed him again, this time near the old fishing docks. He was talking to one of the fishermen, a burly man with weathered skin and a laugh that could fill the whole pier. The conversation seemed light, but there was a spark of earnestness in Lucas's smile, as if he genuinely cared about what the old man had to say. That moment, brief as it was, made me wonder if beneath the rigid exterior lay a heart that beat with the same human warmth as anyone else's. Every time our paths crossed after that, I found myself a little more curious, a little more drawn to him. There was something magnetic about his presence, something that stirred up a mix of admiration and a twinge of something else. Maybe even a hint of rebellion against everything my fathers expected me to feel. You see, in my world, emotions are often kept on a tight leash, measured out just enough to be acceptable, but never so much as to disrupt the grand plan. And here was Lucas, casually challenging all that with the ease of a summer breeze. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Why would someone like me, the daughter of Victor Blackwood, be so intrigued by a man in uniform? The truth is, I've spent most of my life living in a gilded cage, where every move is watched, every word measured. My father's ambitions have always cast a long shadow, dictating not just my choices, but even the way I'm supposed to think. In that kind of life, spontaneity is a dangerous luxury. But Lucas, he represents something different. A break from the script. With him, I can almost imagine a life where I get to decide what feels right instead of always following someone else's plan. It wasn't just his uniform or his confident stride that captivated me. It was the way he looked at the world. When he talked about his work, there was a sense of purpose, a genuine desire to protect and serve that I found incredibly appealing. It was as if he believed in the idea of starting fresh, of making things right, which in a town as wrapped up in secrets and old grudges as ours was nothing short of revolutionary. So here I am, still trying to piece together the enigma that is Lucas Grant. Every time I see him, whether he's patrolling the beach or chatting with someone on the docks, I'm reminded of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, life can surprise you in the most delightful ways. And while I still have plenty of reasons to be cautious, after all, my life has been carefully managed by forces far more sinister than a friendly neighborhood cop, I can't help but feel a little thrill of excitement every time I think of him. I don't know where this newfound curiosity will lead me or how much it will shake up the life I've known for so long, but for now, it's enough to know that amidst the constant hum of my carefully arranged existence, there's something fresh, something real, stirring up emotions I've long kept at bay. And if nothing else, I'm glad that for a brief, shining moment, my everyday routine has been disrupted by a man in a uniform who seems determined to remind me that there's more to life than the safe, predictable tides of my past. There I was, out for one of my late night beach walks because sleep had once again decided to play hide and seek. The moon was full and bold, casting a soft silvery glow over the entire shoreline, and the ocean was alive with whispers of secrets and promises. I had thrown on my favorite worn sweater, and, as always, my feet were bare. There's something about feeling the cool, damp sand that makes you forget everything else for a while. I was deep in thought, as usual, pondering my constant tug of war between Dad's overplanned life and the wild, messy freedom I secretly craved when I saw him, Lucas. There he was, almost as if he'd stepped out of the sea itself. He emerged from the gentle surf like a figure from one of those movies I used to watch, his uniform immaculate even in the moonlight. I froze for a moment, my heart giving a surprised little flutter. Who expects to see a guy in uniform just strolling along the beach at midnight? For a minute, I wasn't sure if I was really seeing him or if my tired brain was playing tricks. But then he turned his head, and our eyes met. His gaze was deep, an ocean of blue that instantly made me think of stormy skies and hidden depths. I couldn't help but smile, even though I felt like a complete idiot for gawking. "Hey," he said softly, almost as if he were testing the waters of conversation. His voice was low and easy, not at all the rigid, formal tone I'd expected. It immediately put me at ease. "Hey yourself," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the rapid thump of my heart. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" He chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that made the night feel even cozier. "Yeah, it really is. I mean, look at that moon, like a giant silver coin tossed into the sky." He grinned, and I could see the playful spark in his eyes. I took a few steps closer, the cool night air swirling around us. "You're new around here, right? I haven't seen you before," I said, half curious, half cautious. "Right, I'm Lucas. Just transferred here a couple of weeks ago. I guess I'm still getting used to all the local charm," he replied, with a slight shrug that somehow made it sound like he didn't mind the slow pace of our little town. I laughed softly. Charm is one word for it. It's quiet and sometimes, honestly, a bit too predictable. But maybe that's exactly what makes it nice. I paused, then added, "And you? What brings a guy like you to a town like this?" Lucas looked out over the water for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I guess I was looking for something, new? A change of scenery, you know? Sometimes you need to step away from the chaos and find a little peace. And maybe a bit of adventure, too." His words hit home in a way I hadn't expected. I'd spent so many nights feeling trapped by the unyielding plans set by my dad, Victor, that the idea of a change, even a small one, felt revolutionary. "Adventure sounds pretty good right about now," I admitted, my tone light but laced with an undercurrent of longing. We fell into a comfortable silence, just letting the sound of the waves and the soft rustle of the sea breeze fill the space between us. I found myself studying Lucas, noticing the subtle details, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the effortless way he moved, as if he was perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the ocean. It was refreshing to see someone so genuine in a world where most things were just, well, scripted. After a few moments, Lucas broke the silence again. "So, Alara, huh? I think I've heard that name around." There was a hint of playful curiosity in his tone, and it made me smile. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, "Alara Blackwood. And you know, my dad isn't exactly thrilled about people noticing my name. But hey, it's a long story." "Oh, I bet it is, Lucas said with a light laugh. Must be something interesting being a Blackwood. I rolled my eyes, but in a good-natured way. Interesting is one way to put it. More like complicated, if you ask me. But tonight, I'm just enjoying the freedom of not thinking about any of that. I gestured vaguely at the dark horizon. Sometimes you just need to get away from everything. He nodded thoughtfully. I get that. Sometimes the ocean is the best therapist, quiet, honest, and always willing to listen. He paused, then added with a smile, plus, it doesn't judge you for your secrets. I laughed, a real hearty laugh that seemed to echo off the water. That's exactly what I need right now. No judgment, just the sound of waves and a bit of moonlight. I looked at him, suddenly curious. So, Lucas, what do you do when you're not patrolling the beach and charming unsuspecting locals? He grinned, and for a moment I saw a flash of mischief. Well, I'm not always on duty, you know. When I'm off, I like to wander around, maybe grab a coffee at that little cafe by the docks. And sometimes I just come here to clear my head. What about you, besides being the subject of all the town gossip? I pretended to ponder dramatically. Oh, you know, the usual. Stuck in a gilded cage, dreaming of running away, and trying to figure out who I really am beyond all the expectations. I shook my head lightly, a smile on my face. I suppose we're both a little bit searching for something different. Lucas's expression softened, and he said quietly, It's funny. Sometimes it feels like the universe just knows when you're ready for a change. Maybe it brought us here tonight for a reason. I found myself nodding, feeling that same inexplicable pull, as if the ocean had conspired to bring us together at that perfect moment. Maybe it did, I murmured. I've always felt like there is more to life than the same old routine. And tonight, well, tonight feels like a hint of something exciting coming my way. For a while, we simply stood there, side by side, watching the moonlit waves roll in and out. There was a calm intimacy in that silence, a shared understanding that sometimes the best conversations happen without too many words. But even in the quiet, I could feel the beginnings of something new stirring inside me, something that wasn't there before Lucas appeared on that beach. Eventually, Lucas glanced at his watch. Yes, even officers have those moments when reality calls, and sighed. I really should get back on patrol, he said, sounding a bit reluctant to break the spell of the night. I nodded, wishing I could hold on just a little longer. Yeah, I get it. The night doesn't wait for anyone, I said, trying to sound upbeat, even though a small part of me was disappointed that our magical moment was ending. He nodded, then with one last friendly smile, he disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there with the moon, the waves, and a heart that felt unexpectedly lighter. I lingered a little longer, watching the spot where he'd been, feeling a mix of wonder and a hint of excitement. The night air was cool and comforting, and as I resumed my walk, I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of something new, a small crack in the carefully constructed wall of my everyday life. And for the first time in a long while, that thought felt downright exhilarating. I'd run into him almost everywhere, like fate had a playful sense of humor. One day, I was at the local market, minding my own business and haggling over the price of some fresh strawberries, when I spotted Lucas by the fruit stand. He was standing there with that familiar, easy smile, chatting with the vendor like he'd known her his whole life. Hey, Alara, he called out as soon as he saw me, his voice as warm as ever. Lucas, fancy meeting you here, I replied, trying to sound nonchalant even though my heart did a little flip every time our eyes met. Buying fruits for a secret midnight smoothie club, or what? I teased, giving him a playful grin. He laughed, that genuine laugh that I'd grown to adore. Something like that, he said with a wink. I'm just here to pick up a few essentials, staying healthy and all that. As we chatted by the stalls, the conversation felt light and effortless. Lucas mentioned something about a new cafe opening up near the harbor, and I couldn't help but get excited at the prospect of another chance to spend time with him. That sounds awesome. I've been dying to try somewhere new, I admitted. Maybe we could check it out together sometime? Absolutely, he replied. I'll text you the details when I hear more. And just like that, our brief encounter ended with a promise of another meeting. A promise that felt as refreshing as a cool sea breeze. Later that week, I found myself on one of my evening walks along the harbor. The place was a mix of old charm and modern quirks, with weathered boats bobbing gently and the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the water. I was lost in thought about all the little conversations and shared smiles I'd been having with Lucas when I heard someone call my name. Ilara! His voice cut through the hum of the harbor like a familiar song. I turned and there he was, leaning casually against a railing, watching the boats drift by. Lucas? I greeted him, my tone light and full of surprise. What brings you here tonight? He pushed himself off the railing and started walking alongside me. I could ask you the same thing, he replied, grinning. I guess I just enjoy the harbor at night. It's kind of magical, isn't it? I nodded, feeling a thrill of excitement as we strolled together. It really is. The lights, the water, it all feels like it's from a different world. We fell into an easy silence, punctuated by our shared smiles and the occasional comment about the scenery. At one point, Lucas looked over at me, his expression turning a bit more serious than usual. I've noticed something, he said softly. It's like every time we bump into each other, something just clicks. I can't really explain it. I laughed lightly, a mix of amusement and something more tender. I know exactly what you mean, I replied. He nodded, his eyes shining in the soft light. I'm glad you feel that way, he said. Because honestly, I've been waiting for moments like these. They make everything else seem less heavy. Our conversations continued to weave through the days, like a comforting melody. One afternoon at the market, I ran into him again, this time near a stall full of vibrant, fresh flowers. He was buying a bouquet of daisies, and I couldn't help but smile at how gentle he looked. Lucas, you with the flowers now? I teased as I approached him. He chuckled, holding up the bouquet. Hey, even tough officers need a little bit of softness in their lives, right? I grinned, stepping closer. Absolutely. And I think those daisies suit you perfectly. He paused, as if considering my words, then gave a small, thoughtful smile. Thanks, Alara. That means a lot coming from you. It was in these little moments that I began to feel something blossoming inside me, a quiet trust and a sense of connection that I'd never allowed myself to experience before. Sure, I was still the daughter of Victor Blackwood, always under the watchful eyes of a man who expected me to follow a certain path. But with Lucas, I felt like I was finally catching a glimpse of a life that wasn't so tightly choreographed. One evening, after one of our chance meetings at a local art exhibit, Lucas and I found ourselves sitting on a weathered bench near a small park by the sea. The exhibit had been a spontaneous affair, a mix of quirky installations and vibrant paintings that celebrated the unpredictable nature of life. I remember Lucas saying, "Art has this crazy way of making you see the world differently, don't you think?" I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Yeah, it's like every piece tells a story that's as unpredictable as life itself. He turned to me, his expression earnest. I'm really glad we've been bumping into each other, Alara. It feels right, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I looked at him, feeling the weight of all the guarded feelings I'd been carrying. For so long, I'd been taught to hide behind the polished veneer of my family's legacy. But in that moment, with Lucas's sincere eyes meeting mine, I wanted to let go of all that. Me too, Lucas, I said quietly. It's like every time we meet, I forget a little bit about all the expectations I've been trying to live up to. He smiled, reaching out to gently touch my hand. I promise, Ilara, I won't ever make you feel like you have to be anyone but yourself. I felt a warmth spread through me at his words, a warmth that was both exhilarating and a little scary, because it meant letting down the walls I'd built over the years. That sounds pretty amazing, I admitted, because I'm really tired of trying to be someone I'm not. And while I still carried the weight of my father's strict expectations, a constant reminder of a life meticulously planned out for me, these moments with Lucas made it easier to imagine a different future. A future where I could laugh freely, dream boldly, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to escape the confines of a legacy I never chose. With each shared smile and every whispered conversation, I felt the hold of my past loosen its grip. Lucas wasn't just a pretty face in a uniform anymore. He was becoming a symbol of possibility, a gentle reminder that life could be as unpredictable and vibrant as the tides that caressed our coastal town. It's funny, really. I always imagined choosing my own destiny. But when Dad started talking about Gregory Stone, I knew I was caught in a game I never asked to play. I was sitting in the family study one rainy afternoon, trying to ignore the incessant tapping of the rain on the window, when Dad finally brought it up. He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression unreadable behind a veneer of calm authority. "Alara," he said, tapping a polished pen against a stack of papers, "we need to talk about your future." I knew that tone all too well, one that meant nothing good was coming my way. "What about it?" I asked, forcing a casual tone, even though my heart was pounding. I didn't like the sound of his words. They always came with strings attached. He sighed, a long, measured exhale that seemed to fill the room with a heaviness I couldn't shake off. "There's an arrangement in the works," he began, his eyes never leaving the papers. "I've been in discussions with Gregory Stone. You know who he is, the man who's built quite the reputation in business. And I think he'd be a perfect match for you." I almost choked on my own disbelief. Gregory Stone, that ruthless, cold-hearted guy whose reputation made my skin crawl, I couldn't help but blurt out, "Perfect match? You mean like arranged marriage perfect?" Dad didn't even pause. "It's not arranged marriage, Alara. It's a strategic alliance, a union that would benefit both our families and, more importantly, solidify our standing in the business community." Gates. His voice was clinical, detached, as if I were just another asset on his balance sheet. I leaned forward, my eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt. "So what? I'm just supposed to marry a man I don't even like because it suits your business plans?" I asked, my tone low and laced with disbelief. "I'm not a commodity, Dad." He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his calm. "I understand that you have your own ideas about life, Alara, but you must see that this is for your own good. Gregory Stone is a powerful man, and this marriage will secure your future. It's not about love. It's about legacy." Legacy. The word echoed in my ears like a death knell for my own dreams. I couldn't help but think of all those evenings I spent with Lucas, moments where I felt alive and free, where every shared smile chipped away at the confines of this gilded cage. And now, Dad wanted to chain me to someone I didn't even want to know. "That's exactly it," I snapped. "I never asked for any of this. Never asked to be treated like a pawn in your grand schemes." My voice trembled, a mix of fury and sorrow bubbling beneath the surface. "You're so busy building your empire that you don't see I have my own life, my own heart," I continued, the words spilling out in a rush. "I want to choose who I love, not be forced into a union that's designed to benefit your bottom line." Dad's eyes narrowed, his tone turning icy. "Alara, this isn't a negotiation. It's about family honor and the responsibilities that come with our name. You'll do as I say." I sat back, stunned by his blunt dismissal of my feelings. It felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder that no matter how much I dreamed of freedom, I was still tethered to a life that wasn't mine to choose. "Family honor?" I repeated bitterly. "Or is it just about control?" That silence that followed was heavy enough to crush me. I wanted to scream, to tear up the carefully crafted image of a dutiful daughter, but I held my tongue. Instead, I murmured, "I'm sorry, Dad. I just can't do it." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite decipher, disappointment, anger, maybe even pity, but he said nothing more. The room grew colder, the ticking of the clock the only sound daring to break the silence. I left the study that day feeling more alone than ever, my mind swirling with questions and doubts. Later, as I sat in my favorite nook by the window with a cup of coffee, I couldn't help but talk to myself, or maybe to you, dear reader. "Is it too much to ask to have a say in my own life?" I whispered to the empty room. "I'm tired of being a part of some elaborate business transaction. I just want to be free." That day, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let my father's plans dictate my future. Even if it meant fighting against everything I'd ever known, I was determined to reclaim my right to choose. Because love, freedom, and a life of my own making were worth any battle, even one that pitted me against my own blood. There's a kind of freedom in breaking all the rules, even if it means running headlong into the unknown. Lucas and I decided that our hearts were worth a little chaos, and that night, everything changed. It started on a Tuesday, or maybe it was a Wednesday. I've lost count of the days lately with all the planning and scheming. I'd been wrestling with the realization that my life was about to be sold off like a prized antique, destined to be wed to Gregory Stone, a man I barely knew and certainly didn't love. I couldn't let that happen. So one rainy evening, as the clock ticked past curfew in our suffocating mansion, I grabbed my bag, stuffed a few essentials in it, and bolted out the door. My heart was pounding like crazy, and every step I took felt like a tiny act of rebellion. I dashed through the back garden, the cool night air whipping around me, and made my way to the secret spot I'd always shared with Lucas, the old boathouse by the harbor. I knew he'd be there. It had become our escape, our safe haven. I reached the weathered door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open as quietly as I could. Inside, Lucas was waiting, leaning casually against a stack of crates, a concerned look on his face as soon as he saw me. "Alara, what's going on?" he asked, his voice a mix of surprise and relief. I couldn't help but laugh, even though my hands were shaking. "I'm done playing the part of the obedient daughter. I'm out, Lucas. I can't marry Gregory Stone, and I'm not sticking around to be another one of Dad's pawns." I paused, catching my breath. I've got nothing but a burning desire to be free. Lucas stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "I knew this day would come," he said softly, "and I'm here for you, every step of the way." His reassuring smile made my heart swell with a mix of exhilaration and tenderness. That was it. A silent agreement passed between us. We wouldn't just run away from the life my father had planned. We would run towards something new, something built on our own terms. Lucas reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "I've arranged something," he said, half joking. "A secret getaway spot. But first, I've got another idea." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Do tell?" With a mischievous glint in his eyes, he continued, "What if we just do it? Right here, right now? Let's get married, in secret. No pomp, no ceremony, just you, me, and the promise that we're choosing our own future." I burst into laughter, feeling the tension and fear melt away with every word. "Are you serious? You want to marry me in a boathouse?" Lucas grinned. "Why not? There's a kind of freedom in breaking all the rules. We're running headlong into the unknown, and I say we might as well make it official." In that moment, everything felt right, even absurdly right. I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "Okay, Lucas, let's do it. Let's make our own little secret, our way out of this golden cage." We didn't have a priest, a fancy gown, or even a legal document in sight. All we had was a worn-out wooden table in the corner of the boathouse, a couple of mismatched chairs, and our wild, pounding hearts. We sat down, our hands meeting in a gentle, determined grasp, and we began to speak our vows, half-improvised, half-whispered promises that felt more binding than any contract ever could. "Lucas," I started, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I promise to always be true to who I am, to never let anyone decide my destiny for me. I choose you, even if the road ahead is messy and uncertain." He squeezed my hand, his eyes full of warmth and a touch of mischief. "And Alara, I promise to support you, to stand by you through every storm and every calm. I choose you, not because it's easy, but because you make life worth fighting for." We laughed at how ridiculous it all felt. Two rebels, tying the knot in a boathouse like a couple of teenagers running from curfew. But beneath the humor, there was a profound seriousness to our commitment. It wasn't about escaping my father's oppressive plans alone. It was about claiming a future where our love, our choices, and our dreams were the only rules that mattered. After our little ceremony, we sat back and let the reality of our decisions sink in. The boathouse was silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing and the occasional creak of old wood. "I can't believe we just did that," I said, half in awe, half in disbelief. Lucas laughed, his hand still firmly holding mine. "I know, it feels like we just rewrote our story in one crazy, impulsive moment." I smiled, feeling a rush of freedom and hope. "Well, here's to us then. to a future built on our own terms, to a love that's messy, unpredictable, and absolutely ours. There's a kind of wild, exhilarating freedom in defying the rules, even if it means leaving behind everything you've ever known. In that cramped, secret space, Lucas and I chose to embrace a life of uncertainty, knowing that our hearts, though battered by past expectations, were ready for a little chaos. And honestly, that chaos might just be exactly what we needed to finally feel alive. At first, everything felt like a dream, too beautiful to be real. Lucas and I had finally escaped our old lives, and our early days together were filled with a kind of freedom I'd only ever imagined. We had already gone to the courthouse and made our marriage official. Our little apartment by the harbor was cozy, if a bit cramped, with mismatched furniture and an eclectic collection of trinkets that somehow made it feel like home. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of seagulls and the soft murmur of the tide, and for a while, life was simply bliss. One of my favorite routines was our breakfast ritual. I'd make a cup of strong coffee, and Lucas would scramble eggs, his way of showing off his culinary skills. One bright morning, as I sat at our wobbly kitchen table, I watched him carefully flip an omelet. "Careful, Chef Lucas," I teased, grinning as he tried not to drop anything. "Hey, I'm trying here," he retorted playfully, a twinkle in his eye that always made me smile. "I might be new to the kitchen, but I'm a pro when it comes to—" He paused dramatically. "Protecting the people I care about." I rolled my eyes affectionately. "That's what you say every morning, but really, it's nice to have a start that isn't dictated by your past." I sipped my coffee and watched him work, feeling a swell of hope that I was finally in charge of my own destiny. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, subtle cracks began to show in the idyllic picture of our new life. Sometimes during these peaceful mornings, I'd catch Lucas in moments that made me wonder if all was as it seemed. One afternoon, while I was making breakfast, I noticed him staring off into space, his eyes distant and a little sad. "Lucas?" I asked softly, setting down my mug. "What's on your mind?" He snapped out of it, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Oh, nothing," he said with a shrug. "Just thinking about stuff." "Stuff, huh?" I prodded gently, not ready to let it drop. "You know you can talk to me, right? I'm all ears." He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "It's silly, really. Sometimes I just get these thoughts about the past and about choices I've made. I don't always know how to explain it." His tone was casual, but the tension in his voice was unmistakable. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Lucas, I love you, but if something's bothering you, we need to talk about it. We're in this together, remember?" He squeezed my hand, and for a moment, the warmth of his touch reminded me why I fell in love with him in the first place. "I know, Alara. I promise I'll try to be more open about it." And despite our efforts to keep the mood light, there were other times when I sensed gaps in his stories, or moments when his eyes would darken for no clear reason. One evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony watching the sunset over the harbor, I couldn't help but ask, "Lucas, have you ever regretted, well, everything before we met?" He looked out at the horizon, his jaw tightening. "Regret?" he echoed, pausing as if weighing his words. "I think everyone has regrets, Alara. Mine are just complicated." I nudged him playfully. "Come on, you can't be that mysterious all the time. Spill the beans." He chuckled, a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes this time. "It's not like that. Let's just say some memories are hard to forget." His evasiveness left me with a lingering question mark, but I decided not to press him further. Instead, I turned back to the sky, trying to focus on the beauty of the moment, though a part of me was increasingly aware that our new life might be shadowed by secrets from his past. Still, our everyday moments were filled with so much joy that it was hard not to get swept up in the happiness. We spent lazy afternoons wandering the harbor, picking up little trinkets from flea markets, and laughing over dinner in our little kitchen. I cherished those moments, the quiet understanding in his smile, the comfort of his laughter, even as I wondered about the ghost that occasionally flickered in his eyes. One night, as we lay in bed, I whispered, "Lucas, I love our life right now, but sometimes I worry. Are you really over your past?" He turned to me, and in the soft glow of the moonlight through our window, he replied, "I'm trying, Alara. Every day is a new chance to build something different. And I promise I'm here with you. I'm trying my best to leave the past where it belongs. His words were reassuring, yet my heart couldn't help but hold on to that small seed of doubt. Despite that, I knew I wouldn't trade these moments for anything. For now, in our little world of shared breakfasts, quiet walks, and whispered secrets, I was willing to believe that love could be enough to heal even the deepest scars. I never imagined that the gentle eyes of the man I loved could hide such a dark legacy. But there I was, piecing together clues that led me straight to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. It all started with small hints, whispered rumors at the market, overheard fragments of conversation, and then the discovery of old records that simply couldn't be ignored. It began on one quiet afternoon when I was browsing through a stack of old newspapers at the local library. I wasn't exactly looking for anything in particular, just trying to distract myself from the lingering unease I'd felt lately. That's when I stumbled across an article about Officer Daniel Hayes, a man whose murder had rocked our town 20 years ago. The article mentioned his name repeatedly, detailing how his death had been conveniently swept under the rug by powerful interests. Something about that story sent a chill down my spine. Later that week, while grabbing a coffee at our favorite cafe, I couldn't help but notice a hushed conversation between two older locals. I managed to catch snippets like, Sherry, Hayes' son, never really got over his father's fate, and the man with the gentle eyes, always watching, always haunted. My stomach churned as I connected the dots. Could Lucas, with those same gentle eyes and quiet melancholy, be connected to Officer Hayes? I felt like I was caught in the middle of a conspiracy I'd never asked to be a part of. That evening, I confronted Lucas at home. The kitchen was dimly lit, and we were sitting across from each other at our small dining table. I took a deep breath, mustering all the courage I had. Lucas, can we talk about something a bit serious? I began, my voice trembling slightly. He looked up from his cup of tea, concern etched on his face. Of course, Elara, what's on your mind? I hesitated, then blurted out, I found something today, an old newspaper article about Officer Daniel Hayes. Do you know anything about him? About his son, maybe? My voice was barely above a whisper, as if saying it too loud might shatter the fragile calm of the moment. Lucas's eyes darkened for a split second before he composed himself. Officer Hayes? Yeah, I've heard about him, he replied, his tone cautious. Why do you ask? I couldn't hold back the flood of questions. Because someone mentioned something about his son, and I couldn't help but think of you, Lucas. And then I overheard people talking about someone with your eyes, your quiet way of looking at things. I'm sorry if this sounds crazy, but are you related to him? My words tumbled out in a rush, a mix of fear, anger, and heartbreak. The room fell silent. Lucas's face was a mask of pain and resignation, and for a moment I felt the weight of my own betrayal. Elara, he started, then paused, as if weighing the gravity of his confession. I pressed on, my voice raw with emotion. Lucas, please, I need to know. I need the truth. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Yes, I'm related to Officer Hayes. I'm his son. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. My mind raced, filled with disbelief. The man I loved, the one who had promised me a future free of control and lies, was hiding a secret that tied him directly to the man my father had murdered. I never imagined this, I whispered, my voice cracking. All this time. And you never told me? Lucas looked down, guilt and sorrow mingling in his eyes. I wanted to, so many times. But every time I tried, I couldn't find the right words. I was scared, Elara. Scared of how you'd react, scared of losing you. His admission was soft, yet it carried the weight of decades of secrets. I felt a surge of anger and hurt. So you married me with this secret hanging over us? Was our love just a way to get at my father? I demanded, my voice trembling between fury and heartbreak. You did this for revenge? He reached across the table, his hand hovering over mine. No, Elara, please believe me. I fell in love with you, truly, deeply. My past, as dark as it is, doesn't change how I feel about you. I never meant to deceive you. I just didn't know how to break free from it. All this time, my body shaking as I talked. Right from the start, you were planning to do this. I pulled my hand away, feeling a cold emptiness settle in my chest. My mind was a swirl of conflicting emotions: betrayal, confusion, and a deep, aching sorrow. I need time, Lucas, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. I need to process this. I don't know if I can ever see you the same way again. That night, lying in bed alone, I spoke to you, dear reader, as if you were the only one who could understand. How do you move forward when the past crashes into the present like a tidal wave? How do you reconcile the man you love with the dark legacy that binds him? I feel betrayed, heartbroken, and utterly lost. The truth had unraveled everything, leaving me stranded between love and a betrayal I never saw coming. In that moment, I realized I couldn't trust a love built on secrets and revenge. I needed space, time to figure out if my heart could ever beat freely again. The truth about Lucas had shattered everything I thought I knew, leaving me raw, confused, and deeply betrayed. Every memory of our whispered promises and tender moments now felt tainted by the weight of his hidden past and ulterior motives. That night, as the moon cast a pale glow through the window, I made a decision. I couldn't stay. Not until I figured out what the hell was going on in my own heart. Walking through the quiet streets, I felt a mix of relief and profound sorrow. Every step away from our shared home felt like a step toward reclaiming a part of myself I'd lost to secrets and betrayal. I kept repeating to myself, I need time to heal, to think. I can't figure out what love means when it's wrapped in lies. At one point, I paused under a street lamp, the light flickering over my tear-streaked face. Maybe one day I'll understand, I murmured to the night, feeling the weight of my decision. I wasn't sure if Lucas's love had ever been pure or if it was just a desperate act born of his own haunted past. All I knew was that I had to find my own truth first. As I walked further away, the comforting hum of the night became my only companion. I resolved that I would come back when, or if, I was ready. For now, I needed to escape the tangled web of our past and listen to the quiet, pleading rhythm of my own heart, hoping that somewhere in the silence, I'd find a way to mend what had been broken. As Gregory's shadow loomed over me, the night seemed to crack open with tension. I was on the edge of the pier, the salty air heavy with unspoken threats, when I saw him, Gregory Stone, eyes cold and full of menace, advancing with a deliberate, dangerous swagger. My heart hammered in my chest, and I froze, knowing that his presence meant more than just a rude reminder of my arranged fate. Before I could react, Lucas burst from the darkness, positioning himself between Gregory and me. Gregory, back off, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. There was something raw in his tone, a mixture of protective anger and deep regret that sent shivers down my spine. Gregory sneered. Oh, so the little runaway now has a knight in shining armor. How touching! His words dripped with disdain, but Lucas didn't flinch. Enough! Lucas snapped, stepping closer. The intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable, as if he were trying to burn away the lies that had haunted us both. The confrontation escalated quickly, voices rising until, in the middle of the chaos, Lucas's voice broke through the clamor, clear and trembling with emotion. I loved you, he confessed, the words simple yet shattering. I loved you even when I wanted to hurt you. I was driven by revenge at first, but then something real took over. I couldn't keep living in that dark, twisted plan. I stared at him, caught between the echo of his confession and the venom in Gregory's threats. For a moment, everything was suspended in the charged air, the clash of past sins, the weight of betrayal, and the desperate hope that love might be able to redeem it all. Lucas? I managed, my voice barely a whisper. How do I know this isn't just another lie? How can I trust that what you feel now is genuine? Lucas's eyes, usually so steady and kind, flickered with vulnerability and regret. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, he said softly, stepping closer until our faces were inches apart. I know I've hurt you, and I've hurt myself by holding on to that need for revenge. But every day since, I've tried to prove that what I feel for you is real. I'm trying to leave the past behind, even if it's messy and painful. Gregory's threat faded into the background as I listened, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The intensity of the moment left me trembling, partly from fear, partly from the realization that my heart was being pulled in two directions. I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption. In the silence that followed, I found myself at a crossroads. I couldn't deny the love we once shared, nor the pain of betrayal that now stung so deeply. I need time, Lucas, I said, my voice raw and unsure. Time to figure out if I can ever forgive you, if I can ever trust you again. Lucas nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, and for a moment, all we shared was the quiet understanding of hearts caught between regret and the possibility of a new beginning. As the night swallowed Gregory's retreating figure, I was left alone with my thoughts, wondering if, in the tangled mess of our past and the uncertain road ahead, I could find my own truth, and if one day forgiveness might be more than just a distant hope,